Greetings and welcome to English News right here on TMH with me, Deletna Dawalko. Moving on to our headlines, IDPs in Tigray suffering from underlying illnesses are set to be on the cusp of death due to the blockade that's been imposed on the region. Social workers rally support for the displaced people in the northern region of Ethiopia, and thousands have been detained in Ethiopia according to the Ethiopian human rights group estimate. A network of 100 Ethiopians displaced by the conflict in the north of the country is supporting others to recover from trauma and access to basic services. One of them is Mebrat, now an IDP in Me'ala. The pain and the trauma that Mebrat experienced when she fled her home has helped her in her current role as a social worker, making her better understand the plight and the needs of the peoples and their assistance. The 32-year-old mother of three never imagined she would become a symbol of hope, trust, and strength for the Tigrayans displaced in Ethiopia who have found refuge in healthcare in Me'ala and the capital of Tigray region.
I have seen in the road many things before I come. I have to help any people if I can. So many people have to be kind to people. As a social work, my work is to protect people. Maybe if they need this hospital, maybe if they need this food, maybe if they need this everything to help them. They need this food, they need this shelter, they need this clothes, they need this shoes. But the main thing, if we say, there is a shortage of medicine here.
Peace is important for all of us to recover fully. With peace, I know I can achieve anything and I want, and I will have a brighter future, Mebrat added, also saying that she dreams of returning home when there is peace in the land of her city. Tigrayans across the country are being rounded up as a one-year-old war rumbles on, and on November 2nd, the government declared a state of emergency, and resulting roundups have been swept up, and anyone Tigrayan descent have been locked up. They're detaining not just the young men and women, but also the mothers with children and the elderly as well, according to the human rights advocates. And interviews with nearly a dozen family members said to friends of detainees, some family members of the victims in the capital described the horrors that they're going through, adding that the residents of Addis Ababa in the Tigrayan capital are now in great distress. Heard their husbands and their brothers were arrested 3 days ago, and that their whereabouts are nowhere to be known. They're taken to their workplaces while the rest were picked up from their homes, and that their lines are no going through. They're also facing a very difficult situation, and Tigrayans are being rounded up by their homes, work, and even from their taxis as well. It's also shameful what has happened in Tigray and Addis Ababa, something you don't accept from a gangster, let alone from a government. Another woman was quoted saying that there's a knock on their door and they're afraid that people are coming to arrest them, and that Tigrayans and Addis Ababa are also going through untold suffering, and they're asking for help, and they've even ventured out from their homes for the last 3 days to avoid being arrested. Tigrayans have been targeted by the police based on the mix of hints, their surnames, details listed on identification cards, driver licenses, even the way they speak Amharic, the national language of Ethiopia. The campaign of arrests, which has also been aimed at the members of some ethnic groups, has swept up people in the cities across the country, according to figures provided by the police, rights groups, and opposition parties. The ethnically motivated detentions come amid a significant rise in online hate speech, which is only adding fuel to the civil war, tearing apart Africa and the second most populous nation. Letitia Bader, the Horn of Africa director at the Human Rights Watch, said the state of emergency is legitimizing and legalizing unlawful practices and creating a real climate of fear. In Addis Ababa, rights groups say police stations are so full of detainees, the authorities have moved the overflow to heavily guarded makeshift facilities, among them youth recreation centers, warehouses, and one major prison. With no access to lawyers, some relatives of detainees say they will not approach these facilities, fearful that they also will be arrested. According to 3 counts, many detainees are kept in packed concrete cells with no bathrooms, no food, abusive sentries, who call them terrorists as well. Some detainees use plastic bottles to urinate. Those are lucky enough to receive food from family and friends, share it amongst others. Fisaha Takla, the Amnesty International researcher for Ethiopia and Eritrea, called the conditions appalling and said they risked sending the country to the brink of a humanitarian rights catastrophe. The Secretary General expresses his concern over reports for arbitrary arrests and detentions, which serve to widen divisions and resentment between these two groups. Secretary General made the remark in a statement to his spokesperson. The Secretary General called upon the authorities to publicly and unequivocally speak out against the targeting of any particular ethnic group and to demonstrate the commitment to human rights and the rule of law. The course of military conflict will not bring the lasting peace and stability to Ethiopia as a whole, and the Secretary General urged that the parties end hostilities, prioritize the welfare of these civilians. Safe and unhindered humanitarian access must be restored urgently as well. The Secretary General underlined that the challenges facing Ethiopia can only be resolved through dialogue involving all parties. The Secretary reiterated his call for the immediate release of United Nations staff members that have been detained in the capital of Ethiopia. Thousands of people have been detained in Ethiopia's capital since the government declared the state of emergency over the country's intensifying war, and the government-created Ethiopian Human Rights Commission estimated Wednesday. The commission expressed grave concern that it was unable to gather data on the detainees and said at least 714 people had been detained in the city and the sub-city of Addis Ababa alone. It said another monitoring team found that up to 300 people have been detained in the eastern city of Dredawa. Authorities are not doing enough to justify the reasons for these detentions. Large numbers of the detainees were of Tigrayan background. The statement said, noting that the elderly and the nursing mothers were among those held at these detention centers, and the commission monitors teams were able to visit. Some were overcrowded, had no toilets, and many had no access to health care either, it said. Ethiopia's government has said it's detaining people suspected of supporting the Tigrayan forces, but witnesses, lawyers, and human rights groups have expressed concern that the state of the emergency sweeping powers are being used to pick up people based on their ethnicity alone. The human rights group's estimate is the largest yet of the detentions that have occurred since the 2nd of November, and teams of volunteers roam the streets in the capital looking for Tigrayans suspected of supporting the Tigray forces fighting the Ethiopia's military in this one-year-old war. Propaganda is part of their war. One of the community policing volunteers in Addis Ababa, Lul Hassan, told AP earlier this week, referring to Tigrayans suspected of supporting the rival forces. As the volunteers checked people's identity documents, we have no time for that, he added. That wraps up our news for the day. Thank you for tuning in. Goodbye.